Hello and welcome back to the Fulfaka of Linguistic Academy of Linguistic Analysis. That wasn't tautology, I'm not repeating anything. Today's a wonderful episode. We're going to have lots of fun looking at a specific theme connected with war. And like lots of fun with this theme connected with war. That's not the humorous beginning I was looking for. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Just a quick preview of or review, I should say, of our scoring system, right? Where we look at the front page, we look at the emotions that are being created. If it's neutral informational, it gets a 0, very scientific, academic. If it starts to cause some emotions, a 5, and then it gets a big 10 if it's going reptilian, making us lose our mind and lose control of our intelligent self. And just a quick review as well of the current status of scoring. At first, the theory was that the further away, we're doing Russia-Ukraine, the war, the further away from the war in the Ukraine, the less emotional the content should be. And so we had here Germany's quite close, but we quickly realized here at the Fulfakov Academy that America was scoring pretty high emotionally, despite being further away than Germany, and England was also quite emotionally high. Australia, Brazil, and New Zealand did follow the pattern of having less news about this on the front page. It was quite emotional when it was there, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, but it quickly disappeared from the front pages, and so we're scoring pretty lowly. So to some extent that applied, but the exception there was the US, and the England, despite the England that I knew is no longer there. England, despite being a bit further away from the action than Germany, was quite a lot more emotional. Like if we look there, we've got like 71 and 7. So there's a really big difference. And I've been looking at the German newspaper developed from time to time, and it does seem to be far less emotional than let's say, The Guardian, for example. Then, based on a friend's advice, we had a look at progressive and conservative, so which side of the political spectrum, and then that yielded some pretty interesting results. Overall, the progressive ones did have more emotion on our scale, that one down there. They were, probably ranging from 5 to 10. The conservative ones, interesting enough, when we had a look, for example, at Fox News, I think it recorded, the conservative American newspaper recorded the highest score, 80, that's actually happened on any day. It had the highest score. But then it could also be 0, like it just wouldn't be there at all, or very, very low if it was there. And so the general conclusion is that on the progressive newspapers, the front page news about this war in particular do tend to be a little bit more emotional than the conservative ones. So that was quite interesting. And then I thought, well, okay, wait a second, because we've still got the highest scores in the US and England than we did in other countries like Germany and Brazil and Australia and stuff like that. And so I thought, there's no real English-speaking link there, because you've got Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and there's no real geographic link. Like England and America aren't really close to each other. So what could it be about these two countries, moving away from the side of the political spectrum? What could it be about these two countries? And then something that was quite interesting was just about the recent news of weapons arriving in Ukraine. And let's have a look at some of the headlines connected with the weapons arriving there. We might be able to get something out here. So we're going to do something crazy, and we're going to start with the French. The French Le Monde. Le Monde, Le Monde, Le Monde. So I'm probably not saying that correctly, just in case you're studying French, don't learn from me. So you can see here the front page news about the arrival of the weapons is connected with the arrival of weapons, but they've got a picture of Biden, the president, not a picture of the weapons themselves, and Joe Biden justifies. And that's very interesting here, like justifie, we can safely guess that that's justifies. Joe Biden justifies le reinforcement de l'aide militaire. If you read it with an English accent, it's English, but when they speak, it's like, hey, what did he say? I don't understand French. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. He justifies. It's a very interesting word. I'll put an arrow there. He justifies. That means that maybe it's not the right thing to do. So it's very interesting that in the French newspaper Le Monde, the first thing we see is Joe Biden justifies. Now, it is quite a positive and happy picture of the man. Like, it does look like someone we should listen to. He's got a suit and a tie on, and we should listen to these people. Is he white? Well, he's white, but should we listen to white people? I don't know. He's moving his hand in a very intelligent way, and he does appear to be holding something in his other hand. And look, he's sitting in front of a fireplace. And so I think a lot of these things add up to presenting this man as an expert of sorts that should be listened to. Look, he's got a little pin of a flag on his jacket. And so I think we should be listening to this man. He's not wearing a tea towel on his head. You know, obviously that's completely derogatory, and I'm saying that just as a joke. Yeah, I don't edit these videos, so that's going to be in there. But yeah, and I was talking about tea towels, nothing else. Just like, and he's not wearing like a glove on his head either. Okay, so we've got a situation here where he's presented in a positive way and he's justifying, and so it's kind of pushing us towards agreeing with this. But the picture itself is quite intellectual. You know, there's no picture of weapons of mass destruction or weapons of minimal destruction or lethal weapons or defensive weapons. He's justifying it and he's refuting. I think he voleur some sort of desire. He's refuting the fact of a war with Russia. So at the same time, he's in an intelligent way of saying, like, he's justifying the delivery, but saying, you know, saying no to war with Russia at the same time. Does that make any sense? You can decide. We're not thinking about whether or not that makes sense. But it's interesting. It's interesting. He's talking about the strategy down there, so a bit of specifics. Quite intelligent there in the French newspaper at the rival. Now we get to the German newspaper. There's a little bit more of the traditional, like, this is a weapon, like, woo. Yeah, and it's German. We can't really guess that well. Like, liefern nach Interesse an Ukraine. Russland halt Atomwaffenübung an. So again, you've got like atomic weapons, right? What's that saying? I don't know what it means. Abhalten. Like, does it mean keep back? I think so. And so you can see that's already a little bit more emotional, but again, they're talking about nuclear weapons. And we saw this right at the beginning of the invasion, the conflict, what is it in Russia they call it, a special invasion? No, a special operation. At the beginning of this war, we saw the Germans talking about World War III, the Germans. We saw the Germans talking about World War II, no, World War C. But there's this same newspaper developed was talking about, you know, is this World War III? And I just kind of think that this is getting people reptilian. You know, when you start talking about Russia and nuclear weapons and World War III, it's really pushing you towards that dinosaur going, oh my goodness me. But most likely in a point of view of not being particularly enthusiastic about the development of the situation, which is interesting because when we have a look at the German comments, this is in the same article in the German newspaper. If you're a truth seeker, one interesting thing to do is like forget a little bit about the truth because it's quite difficult to ascertain. And some philosophies would say it doesn't exist. But what you can do is have a look at like what's the projection of truth by a large number of people, which can be manipulated, which is apparently one of the reasons why Elon Musk is buying Twitter. But if we have a look at this, we can see this is the most popular comment under this article. And we say, oh man, I think we can guess what that means. Die Armes eskalieren weiter. So I don't know what Armes is. Maybe conflict, das ist nicht gut. But eskalieren is clearly escalating. And so people, das ist nicht gut. Everyone knows that one. Good, man. So 98 upvotes for something that's saying that, you know, this is not good, this is escalating. And I think that matches really well with the picture. And so the picture might look like it's positive, but when it talks about Atomwaffen, like nuclear bombs next to it, and the fact that, you know, Germany's kind of probably a nuclear target of Russia if something goes wrong, you know, people there realize that they may cease to exist within the near future if things do go wrong. And so that's why they might not be so interested in the escalation of the conflict. If you're interested, I'd recommend looking at this every day and looking at the most upvoted comment and just seeing if there is a kind of correlation between the most popular comments and the type of feelings being created on the front page there, because we did talk about what's emotional, what's not, but is it pushing towards more aggressive emotion? Is it pushing towards a more scared emotion? And this is where it's really interesting to have a look at The Guardian, which is English and it's progressive, which should put it quite high up. And here we've again got the same picture of the rockets flying off into the distance. But here, straight US to send advanced rocket systems. So in the French newspaper, Biden was justifying and talking about how this is not a war. Here is like US to send advanced rocket systems as Russia. So they're contrasting US and Russia. There was no real mention. There was a mention of like not having a war with Russia, like America not having a war with Russia. And the German one was kind of about World War III or atomic. Russia has atomic weapons, not World War III. Russia has atomic weapons. Be careful. But here, what's Russia doing? Does it have atomic weapons for the people reading The Guardian? No. Russia tightens grip. It's just wonderful, isn't it? Russia tightens grip. Okay, so beautiful, beautiful language. And what is the HIMARS rocket system? So there's some details on the rocket system. Yeah, so rather than justifying the delivery like the French newspaper was doing, for the English people who open up, well, not everyone who reads the Guardian is English, people opening up the Guardian, then they don't have to read about a justification. They read about what it does and how good it is. And I think the language here is fascinating. Like, again, you've got that picture, the same one that we saw there in the German newspaper. Pretty much the same. They've gone for two pictures here in the Guardian. I like that. They got the two of them streaking off into the distance, and there's an explosion that's just happened as it fires away to kill people. Biden approves medium-range rocket system. So medium range, they're pointing out some detail there. And then this wonderful, wonderful word, to bolster Ukraine defenses. So as they fly off into the distance to kill people within a mid-range, it's bolstering Ukraine defenses. It's just wonderful. And then what's most interesting, and unfortunately I didn't save a picture of this, the previous main headline within The Guardian was, "The West can change the outcome." So again, plea, that's a wonderful word there. Plea, please, 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 for heavy weapons on Ukraine frontline, for heavy weapons. So what was being sent before probably wasn't heavy. They need heavy weapons on Ukraine frontline, and it's a plea. The West can change. So I love the use of the word can. It's like, it reminds me of the story when I was growing up about the little train that could. It climbed the mountain like, I think I can, I know I can, and it didn't. And it was interesting to see in Obama's first campaign, he really emphasized can as well, and yes, we can, yes, we can. And here the West can change the outcome. You can achieve this result. You just need to. In Obama's case, yes, we can. I don't know if he clarified within that very short yes, we can. In that four-word phrase, it didn't really say what. Like, Trump had a very simple phrase, build a wall. Like, he had like 3 words there, if you count an article as a word. So this kind of simple motto, build the wall, yes we can, and here the West can change the outcome. And there's a plea for help, and we can change it. We need to help those people. Okay, so very interesting difference between the British newspaper, the English newspaper we here see at The Guardian, and particularly the French one, I think, where you had the justification for the delivery, and we're not going to have a war with Russia. Whereas here it's more of a plea, it's more about like changing the outcome for those people who are pleading on Ukraine frontline. And that was the main story there. So it went from being a plea to then, this picture that we see here of rockets flying into the distance, and those people who were pleading are probably now safe and happy. And generally speaking, like, we've been sticking to the front pages, but this one you might have noticed I'm not giving scores because I'm looking more at the development of narrative in a kind of, hopefully what will be less than 20 minutes. Here we've got, the West can change the outcome. Yeah, so again, change the outcome, plea for heavy weapons in the Ukraine frontline. And I just thought it'd be interesting to see the photo that accompanies that. So you can see what looks to be an American soldier next to something that's destroyed. Because he's American, we'll probably assume that that's a Russian military vehicle that's been destroyed. And he's got his foot on it, like I have. It's like when a hunter shoots a bear. They traditionally put their foot, there you can see his left foot, they put their foot on the dead prey to show that they have conquered. They have conquered the victim. The hunter has been victorious. And interesting enough, when we come down the south, people under constant fire say they can beat Russia with more help. So people are like that, under constant fire. So they are under constant fire. That means they have a problem, which means they need a solution. And what is the solution? They can, yes, we can build a wall. Yes, we can build a wall. They can beat Russia with more help. And so what's interesting here is the photo is actually not an American. It's a Ukrainian MP and Special Forces commander, which is interesting because from some of the photos I've seen of Ukrainian soldiers, they're remarkably similar in uniform to the Russian soldiers, probably because of their common Soviet background. But here, I don't know, maybe because he's Special Forces, I don't know, maybe that is like what Russian Special Forces look like. I'm not an expert. He just, for some reason, looks American in that picture. Maybe because of the shoes. I don't know. He looks very American with that helmet. Anyway. Victory now depends on our international friends. Down the bottom there, victory, the very positive word victory, depends on our Russian friends. So what's interesting is, and I think very positive really, is there's a lack of dead bodies. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but in the newspapers I've been looking at, the dead bodies have disappeared for some reason, which is good because, you know, when you look at dead bodies and pictures, it doesn't make you feel very happy. People are still dying, which is bad. Let's hope that victory, the victory that is peace, can reign supreme in this war-stricken area of the Ukraine. By the way, next video is going to be about maps, about what's actually happening, like the military action, where is it, according to the maps in the newspapers. Very interesting video, so please catch that one as well. But here we're focusing on the delivery of weapons. So definite problem solution type, where we have a problem, people under constant fire. We've got the emotions in the problem, the plea for heavy weapons, very specific with the demand for what they want. And then the solution, which is this man, who I thought was an American soldier, can put his foot on the killed prey in a sign of victory. So then this is from a few days ago. We see in the New York Times, it is still dominated by people being killed in America by weapons. So that was the main story in the front page. But if you scroll down a bit, straight away you get to people being killed in Eastern Europe with weapons. It comes down here, and for me, this is probably my favorite headline of this whole story, this whole saga, this whole war. So European leaders, this one down here, I'll try and zoom in a bit. So very quick there, the French newspaper Le Monde had Biden on the front justifying, but, you know, refuting the fact that this would lead to a war with Russia. You know, let's be careful. German won World War III. No, nuclear weapons, not World War III. Nuclear weapons, big difference. And in the New York Times, we have here, European leaders is the subject. What are the European leaders? Plan war summit. So the European leaders, not Biden justifying anything like that. No talk about Russia having nuclear weapons. Not even talking about like Ukraine. Like, it's Europeans plan war summit, which is not a very nice thing to have to plan, as new weapons arrive in Ukraine. And this is what I love. This is why I love it, because like new weapons arrive in Ukraine. It's like doop, 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 doop. They take off their backpacks, put down their suitcases. All right, we're in the Ukraine, guys. What do we, you know, where should we visit in the Ukraine? The new weapons arrive in Ukraine. And I think one key thing missing here, which was pointed out in the English newspaper, was pointing out about American systems. Obviously in the French one, they're talking about American systems. German one, I didn't go into it too much. But there seems to be an adjective missing, as new American weapons. Like, honestly speaking, I think to be a bit closer to what we might see as the truth, you put American weapons. Europeans plan war as American weapons arrive. It's just horrible, man. I feel so sorry for Europeans. Like, American weapons can arrive as much as they want, and there seems to be some sort of connection between American weapons arriving and European leaders planning war, German press talking about Russian nuclear weapons. Probably not a pleasant situation to be in at all for the Europeans. With the more and more American weapons arriving, possibly in the future, what does that mean for European war plans? In the French newspaper, Biden says America will not be in a war with Russia. Don't worry. Europeans are planning their war with Russia. Possibly. Well, yeah, I mean, plan a war summit. Would that be with which other country? Yeah, I mean, we can effectively assume they're planning a war with Russia. And just as a quick side note here, we've got a map. I'll do that in another video. That's going to be way too long. So that's what I particularly liked about the American one. We do remember that same idea of a plea from a couple of videos ago. I think it was on the front page of the New York Times, before the delivery of the weapons, before the passing. So again, you had that problem solution. You know, is the solution their big front page? Probably not, because, you know, when your children in your own country are being shot, and from what I understand, quite repetitively, you know, they're like kind of this glory hunting of weapons destroying people overseas, might not go down too well with the public that's reading the newspaper. So that might be the reason why. We don't really look to the why. It's quite difficult. I really advise you speculate. Don't try and fix one idea and just speculate lots of ideas and then see how that pans out over time. It's really quite interesting. And then the last one here, Fox News. Interesting enough, again, it's connected with the shooting of children in America. But it's something raise and replace, demolishing Texas school after deadly massacre. But there's a little bit here about Ukraine as we go down. An unorthodox move, pro-Russia Ukrainian church delivers huge blow to Putin, which is quite interesting. It's Fox News, it's an American conservative media outlet. And their emphasis on the delivery of the weapons is about Ukrainian church delivering a huge blow, which I think is wonderful, really. You know, I'd much rather churches deliver huge blows than mid-range rocket systems. I think that would be better for everyone. And then what's very, very interesting, really, from like exposure of information, very, very surprising. Germany, France call on Putin to hold serious negotiations with Zelensky. So that's quite interesting because I didn't notice much of this fact that happened recently about some phone call between the leaders of Germany, France, and Russia about trying to find a solution rather than plan war summits and delivery of American weapons. But what's interesting here is the language. Germany, France call on Putin. So they didn't call Putin, they called on. And usually we call on someone who's doing the wrong thing to do the right thing. So if you're looking at Russian propaganda or Russian media, right, that would say like Putin calls on Germany and France. Putin calls on America. But here you've got Germany, France call on Putin. And quite interesting that Germany, two countries, Germany and France call on Putin. They don't call on Russia, which is very, very interesting. I don't know if I've seen that before, where you've got like America calls on Putin or Russia calls on Biden. It's a very, very interesting combination there, where you've got the countries, possibly because in America, everyone knows Putin now, but nobody knows who the French guy is and who the German guy is. And so putting those people's names there wouldn't mean anything to these readers. So possibly that's why. But it is an interesting combination. And it's also interesting that this is making news. Two things about the church striking a blow and Germany and France, two countries calling on a person to do something with another person. Zelensky is also famous now, I imagine, in America. Very, very different from the other newspapers we've seen. So, guys, a little bit of a change today. We didn't sit there and give points and stuff like that because what I wanted to do was just have a look at one story and how it has a very, very different viewpoint. I mean, can you imagine that if you were the French guy opening that French newspaper, you were saying, he's justifying it, you know, it looks to be justified, that respectable picture. If you open the German newspaper, you're going, oh, atomic Waffe, scheiße, I'm going to New Zealand. If you open the English one, then you're kind of getting this kind of, yes, we're solving the solution, and you get to read about how good this system is that's solving the solution. And in the American one, you get the fact that they've been delivered. Not much of an emphasis on solution because that is connected with death, and that they already had death with children on the front pages. But one last interesting thing, and it comes back to our take. So again, if we have a look at the English scores of 71, they're very high emotional content. There was a -20 exception, but 35-20, it's been very high, 30. With the German ones lower, the other ones were very, very low. England's a lot stronger, the English newspaper's a lot stronger, and the American one's a lot stronger. So not geography. There was that one about progressive being a bit more emotional. But I thought, okay, so what is the connection between England and the US? It's not a geographic thing. It can't be a language thing because of Australia and New Zealand. But here we've been talking about weapons, so I thought let's have a look at weapon sales. Weapon sales of this thing streaking along, and I thought, so Ukraine's fairly straightforward. I think America's already hit $60 billion in weapon sales, which is a massive amount considering the size of the country and considering the fact that I don't think any Americans are involved at all. And so I thought, okay, what other countries have been experiencing a war? And what are the weapon sales connected with that? And then so I got on the internet and found a map of wars around the world. And this here is the current map, and as you can see there, you've got like the Ukraine up here, which is very, very dark, which means it's quite bad. This is about conflicts. Okay, so the ones that are really dark imply some sort of, lots of people dying type of thing. This country's down here, because it's in Africa, I don't know what country that is. And you probably don't either. Well, it depends who you are, of course. This one down here is Saudi and Yemen. And I'll just tell a quick story about that one. Like that's been completely absent, really. More or less, like just before Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was a front page news story in I think both the English and the American newspaper, like New York Times and The Guardian, about some bombing of a hospital in Yemen. And I was quite shocked to see that because the only reason why I knew there was war going on there is I was watching Chinese news one day, like a few years ago, and I just saw the Chinese guys talking about war, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Will Russia get involved? If they do, can Russia beat America in a conflict? Who will win? And I just thought, oh my goodness me, this is World War III. Went running home, didn't have my phone with me after I got my Chinese takeaway. This is in a Chinese takeaway restaurant, so that's where I saw the news. Got on the internet, there's nothing anywhere on the front pages about this. And I just thought, that's so weird. How can there be such a conflict? And no news. And then just, it's in that dark red. If we look at the statistics, well, I'm not much of a statistics man, but I just want to give you a general idea. So we'll go with the French, just because the French are really cool and their newspapers are cool. And we've got here the Yemen war will have killed 377,000 by the year's end, which is 2021. Millions have been displaced. Okay, so You can see there, they do vary. Like, I think the lowest one I saw was 150,000, 377,000. Here's a higher one. Millions of people displaced, and barely on the front pages, which is always worthwhile thinking about. Like, why is something on the front page, something not? One commentator I saw just said it's just because people in Ukraine are white. That could be a reason. We're not going to explore it. Just think of all the different possibilities and have fun with that. But what I want to get to is this correlation. Like, why is it that the English and the American news tends towards the more emotional? And it's like, let's have a look at weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, which is involved in the war with Yemen. And then we get it there. I was just saying the French are really cool and that they're selling weapons there during the conflict. I don't know when it started. Do you know when the Saudi-Yemen war started? Probably not. Do you know when it peaked, when the worst period of time was? Probably not. You probably know everything about the fact that the Russian tanks around Kiev and now the fighting's in the eastern Ukraine. You know about that stuff. But you know nothing about the Saudi-Yemen war, despite millions of people being displaced. And I don't know, like 150 to 300,000 people dead. Look, I'm laughing. That's no laughing matter. But just the lack of existence of this on front pages of newspapers is just beyond belief. And then we can see there that the sales there, both 2017, 2018, we can see that really rocketed from America. It's like, wow, a massive increase. Could that be Donald Trump coming in? But in any case, it's been quite solid all this time. And so perhaps there we've got a correlation. As we scroll down, we see the Germans who kind of let's keep things from escalating. Germans, 298 million, it's not to be sniffed at. But if you compare it to that 11.5 billion from the US in this 4 years, it just pales in comparison. And so perhaps there is a correlation between emotion and arms sales. That's getting very conspiracy theory-like. And this is why you got to be careful of the why, because you start to believe in all sorts of conspiracy theories. But I think it's interesting to explore this type of thing and have a think about that. And then if you have a look at Britain, you can see that it was kind of going up, and then boom, it came right back in there, which is just amazing. And just, don't take statistics too seriously. First of all, how they measure the statistics. Second of all, perhaps there are some sort of indirect sales that can go through, and like Britain, UK actually increased it, we don't know. But really worth thinking about the fact that we've got the British and the American are so emotional, and they sell more weapons. And then you have a look at colonial history and what you might call post-colonial American imperialism. People on the left might be familiar with that type of term. You might see something like that happening. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was a little bit different from the usual scoring one. I just wanted to kind of have a look a little bit more at the kind of correlations. I keep saying at the Full Fuck Up Academy we don't look at the why, but every time we look for a correlation, we're looking for why. And I think we've kind of hit a bit of a nail on a head, a bit of a nail. It's not the nail. There are like many different nails going on. So keep exploring, have a look yourself, and next video we're going to have a look at the maps, because the depiction of maps is also pretty interesting. Have a good one, guys.